So the idea for this talk was based on the discussion during the lightning talk with Katrina Holmes, and the question was, what can we do to diversify our tech teams? Because when we try to hire people, we tend to struggle to find diverse candidates. And as an example, so the last two jobs we hired for, the one before last, I got 40 CVs, not a single woman, and well, out of 40 CVs, there were probably 35 white men, and not a single woman. On the other hand, the last one we did, I had the majority of women. And I'm not 100% sure what we did different, apart from the fact that the second one was a junior position, and that we slightly reworded the job description, and that because it was a junior position, I put it on the codebar website, job board. So,
is that the only thing you changed? You advertised it on the codebar website more than the last?
Yes, and it got me a lot of CVs.
And is a junior role, you said, rather than
yes,
like
completely junior, because that's what the codebar job board is about. It's really for junior people. The previous one was not a junior role. So
I think both those things there, though, one of them being that perhaps women and people from underrepresented groups are less likely to be going for more senior positions just because there are fewer.
Yeah.
So perhaps now with initiatives like codebar for junior and trainee positions, be a more diverse application base.
Yeah, although we weren't looking for someone very senior, we're looking for 2 to 3 years experience, so it's not.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then
in that case, maybe it is to do with where you're advertising.
Yes.
If you're advertising in the same old places.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the I forgot my words. That's part of the equation, is where you're advertising. I also feel that there's a difference between the people who apply to your job and recruitment agencies. On the last job, we had a good proportion of women. Was mostly people who applied themselves. Whereas the one before that, I had a lot of applications from recruitment agencies.
Were the agency giving you back white men?
Yes.
Do you think that's because they are wording the job description in a certain way that's putting other people off? Or do you think they're only putting the job under the nose of white men?
Could be how they're targeting people.
Well, so the first part would be our fault because we worded the JD. And it's true that we've done a lot of work on the JDs over the past few years to ensure. So there's a couple of things we've done to ensure that we don't have any gendered wording, as much as we can tell, and to also make sure that we say explicitly that we will accept people who have done a boot camp as well as a CS degree and that sort of things. So we've seen an improvement with that, but not as much as I would like. One thing I tried on the last one, which seemed to work quite well, is to ask, with the recruitment agency, to ask every one of them to give me a copy of their diversity policy.
I think that's a thing, right? That like men will apply for basically anything. So if it says like 2 years experience and you've got a year and a half, a dude will apply and a woman won't. Like if you say has to be good at this, the guy will be like, I've done it once. You know what I mean? Like they'll apply for anything, right? And from what I've read, female candidates tend to only apply if they can do all the things in the list, as opposed to being like, it's close enough. You know, I've seen the computer.
That's very
how can it be?
From what I heard.
Like, I think you have to make it quite clear that some things are just a nice to have. Like, it would be desirable if you know that, but it's you know, you would still get an interview if you didn't know that thing, because you will have women just not apply if they don't know one of the things that you've listed, maybe.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time agonizing over the wording then, because, and the first thing we did was limit the number of things that we considered essential. And then on the non-essential part, we spent a lot of time trying to word it to say, it doesn't matter if you don't know the things below. It will help you get into the job quicker, but it doesn't matter if you don't have it. I can't remember the exact wording we used, but yeah.
The other thing that I also think on the recruiter angle is that a lot of the senior female devs I know, when they job hunt, they just go purely through networks. So a lot of them, like, you know, even some of the ones we have at Codebar, a lot of the times people are like, oh, like, I'm just going to post, because most of the time they want to work in teams and environments where they know that someone else has worked before and can almost vouch for it. And so they don't go through to the recruiter pool. And I do think, like, recruiters in general end up with probably like not a very diverse, which probably, but yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, and where I work, Clio, we have, I think, 18 engineers. We have 2 women. It's a very sad statistic. But we are actively, like, I think we had the problem that Katrina was describing at Status Cake, where we're now like trying to actively hire. We want to, like, it's made explicit, like we absolutely want to hire more diverse set of candidates into the team. But it's just proving really hard. I don't know if we suffer from the thing of, like, because we have so few women, it's becoming less attractive to a woman, a developer. It might also be the fact that the pipeline issue, we're looking for more senior developers, and it's the issue that, you know, with the junior role, we could find a lot more diverse candidates, but like if we're looking for like more than 5 years, suddenly the pool just shrinks a lot. So yeah, I guess I just want to know if this is a problem your companies have, what you're doing to fix it, because we are actively trying to fix it. I'm trying to like push the company, and like the people team is doing a great job of like moving in that direction, but I'm also just to hear like concrete actions that we can take to make your company, like, that has worked for you, that's made your company more accessible and welcoming, and attracting these kind of candidates.
I think that's surely.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying that surely is a problem for every company, and I think when it comes to woman hiring as well, not to step on those who might hire women, but I find that most of them are also white women as well. You don't really get that much breadth of like women of color, just from different ethnicity and race as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in terms of the working out whether you'll be a good fit and wanting to go through a network because you'll be able to talk to people who've worked there. I wonder if, you know, like if the company has a blog or articles written by members of staff, like who are the members of the team that are writing? Like if you have female developers or, you know, a more diverse range of developers, are they visible on the company website? Perhaps they could have written about their experience and that could be attached to the job advert so that if people are applying, they can see the diversity within the team. And it's like sometimes, you know, you look at a company's website, you look at our team page, and it's just a bunch of bunch of guys, you know, aged 25 to 30, and you go, oh, I'm not going to fit in there, you know.
Yeah, so that was a pretty good proposal, being like, oh, we should present a more diverse hiring panel for candidates that come in. So, you know, but then the question is like, isn't that a lot of load on the 2 female engineers in the team? Like, are we going to have to interview every engineering candidate that comes through? So it's yeah, but I really like the idea of like just visibility, like on a blog or whatever. That's a good shout.
That problem you mentioned is pretty much what happened in my last place. Like the female woman that's in the team, they're always asked to be in photos or like get into interviews and stuff, to a point where it just feels like a bit artificial. Like if you know our company, you know that it's not as diverse as it looks. It's just that 2 women there makes it look like, oh yeah, we've got women, but having women does not mean it's diverse. Like there are. I mean,
You have to inspect the photos and see if it's the same one.
You mentioned age. Yeah, you mentioned age group there as well. Like if it's like the 20, 30-year-old, like, 'cause I guess tech has got this reputation of being quite a young industry. So it's like, what do people that's in like 30 plus or in the older part of their life think? Like, oh, am I going to fit in the team? That might potentially.
Yeah, I think that is a consideration as well. Like, because I'm a career changer. You know, I'm not a new graduate. I am a bit older. I don't think I'd want to be on a team with a bunch of 25-year-old guys. You know, so that's something for me as well. You know, just people that are around my own age or even older, and then it makes me feel like I'm, you know, not old and past it.
Yeah, the age thing is the interesting one, right? Like we did a survey. And it turns out that no one where I work is older than 45, which is crazy. Like, it's so crazy. But I think especially, like, I've worked in startups mainly, and you see that trend mainly in startups where people tend to skew younger. And I think it's also, like, sometimes the work-life balance you have in places like that. It just, like, because, you know, you tend to work a bit longer, they aren't always very conducive to like parents, for example, or like people with certain carrying responsibilities. It just almost like it becomes an inaccessible environment, I guess, to some extent.
Yeah, but we're saying about how we're going to address this, like, I don't see an easy way, like it's especially at the senior level, because everyone starts from somewhere, right? They got to start at the beginning. So I think it's by doing the work now. The junior developers that we see today will be the future senior devs. So it's about letting them in the door, and then like I guess nurturing them and mentoring them, that kind of thing, and they will grow over time. I don't really see an immediate fix at the top because there's not enough.
I guess, like, sorry.
That points to another issue in the tech industry, I think, in the fact that very few companies hire really new starters. They will always want 2-3 years experience. And yeah, I'm not sure that's... so it's always a question of how do you want them to get experience if you don't hire really junior people?
The other thing is also like, someone said, where are the diverse computer science graduates in 2000? Yeah, like I've also heard the statistic of like a lot more women change paths. Like there seems to be a bit of a glass ceiling for like senior tech management type roles. I wonder if that's something that you've seen in your companies, like.
Yeah, like how many senior leadership? So forget about the senior tech experience. I'm talking about like just senior leadership. How many people do you see that are women? I'd say not that many.
Good point.
Funnily enough, the most diverse places I've worked for in that respect are large retail banks.
That's interesting.
So especially the last one I did So the last one I worked at was Lloyd's Banking Group, and that was probably one of the most diverse environment I worked in.
That's interesting. It's like,
And I think part of the answer is that because it's a large company, HR is trying to enforce some stuff, and then it starts from there. And we also had some very, very good. So even at management level as well, we had a mix of men and women, and that makes a difference because it shows that the team is diverse and that you can any position. But yeah, I've seen more diversity in large company than in startups.
Do you think the bigger international companies have like a stricter HR policy around that, or I don't know, or just a bigger pool of people when they're hiring internal management or something like that?
Yeah, I think bigger companies will have an HR policy about and a diversity policy of some sort. Whether it works or not is a different question. Whereas a lot of startups just make it up as they go along, which is exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think you have to be a lot more explicit in terms of if you're a startup and early on, once you get a team size, like it gets quite hard to, because of the problems we've mentioned, it gets quite hard to start to think about later. I have grown my team from just me to now 16 people, and we've got 7 women out of 16. So, like, but also I built some ideas behind how, like, so a lot of the stuff we've talked about into a part of our hiring process. So making sure we're not using gendered language, not putting too many explicit, like the requirements, making sure you don't do the requirements too much. And also like what you look for, how you evaluate people is also a key thing, because if you don't fit the groups that you're trying to hire for, what you look for in candidates may not be the things that say that those other candidates are good candidates for you, like the people you're looking for. So I've actually got links that I can post to. There's a online thing that you can check the gendered language in your job ads. So you can put your job ads through that to remove gendered language. And there's also one for simplifying the English that you use, which could be important if you're hiring people. We hire people in other countries who may not have English as their first language, so simplified language helps with that. And having just thinking about the requirements carefully as well, to make that quite like a low bar. The problem you have though is then that you open yourself for a lot of CVs, and you have to do a lot of sifting of CVs, because that's the first step. You've already lost everyone. You don't know who you've lost if you don't do that.
Yeah, the gendered language we use a company called Text.io on one of our JDs to find some of that. We didn't use them a second time because their pricing model is very obscure.
There's a free site by someone. So there's a paper about gendered language in job ads, which I can post. I can't because my browser is broken. But I can post a paper, and the person who wrote the paper, or the people who wrote the paper, also built a little tool to do that. I will try and post that when I can get my browser working again.
When you mention gendered language, am I right? You mean more than just he, she, like the pronouns?
Yes. So things about being competitive.
I read a study about this. Yeah, like certain words are seen as more like aggressive and male.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's more likely to attract male candidates apparently than like.
So the language doesn't have an effect on male candidates. It only has an
As
effect
much, yeah.
on
I think
female
I
candidates.
remember reading a study about this.
Let me try and see if I can get that.
And even sort of phrases like, "Oh, we work hard, play hard," you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's just
and you know, companies that talk about, "Oh, we do beer Fridays, we do this thing after work, blah blah blah." That's not going to appeal to women with young children who can't do things after work. They're going to feel like they're not going to fit in, or they're not going to be able to socialize with their colleagues, or something like that.
Yeah, one of the things we did as well was try to simplify the whole JD and what was in the job description to really simplify the language and not just get to the point, basically saying we want someone who can do that.
So I posted some links in the chat for people to follow up. There's a paper about the gender language, and also they have a tool which you can use it's free to use. So, and also gives the words that are considered gendered.
So. The text here.
Stuff, yeah. There's a question here from Stephen who said, "I would be about the experiences when applying, like why they didn't go for certain companies, what recruiters said to them, etc." I guess from my point of view, it's been mostly okay. Like usually I would see, I usually like interviews where I could actually go into the office and meet a bunch of people on the team. So like you would usually get to meet like half the team effectively across like 2 hours or so. And you kind of get a pretty good gauge of how, like what the team is to some extent. So teams where I didn't see any women at all, like there were a couple of companies like that where they had huge tech teams. If they said, we really want you to be our first female engineer, I don't want that mental load. Or if they said, oh, you know, like we've really been struggling to hire women, and we have like 50 devs. Like if you've reached that number of devs and you haven't actually actively tried to change that, like that to me, it's a reflection of like what is valued at your company, and like that speaks more to anything. Also, like as a woman, I find the salary conversation really awkward. I don't know how other people deal with it. Maybe everyone finds it awkward, especially when, like, I don't know if the men on here get this, but sometimes when I say this is how many years of experience I have, this is the salary I want, they'd be like, oh, right, okay, like, are you like that's quite high? And I'm like, well, would you say that to someone else? Is it just because, or they're like, oh, like, why are you going for this job? So that sometimes is a big put off. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think part of it is also one thing we changed recently was to make sure we had the salary range in the JD so that people could have a look at it and say, yes, that looks like that's something I want or not, rather than say negotiable or competitive or whatever.
I hate competitive stuff. It's just such a waste of time, and the recruiters will always trying to push you to say a number, even though like statistically a company has so much more information on their cards that you don't know about, whereas the only two things that they don't know about you is how much you want and how desperate you are for the job. That's it.
Yeah.
If they know those two things, you're screwed. Basically, you have like no power to like negotiate.
Yeah, I also saw at Makers Academy that did this really interesting like salary negotiation workshop for women, and it was interesting where they actually it was how, you know, in books like Lean In, it's very much like be aggressive, like you need to embody all these traits, and it was saying actually doing. Yeah, being aggressive, like being like a man, actually when women did those things in conversations, it actually worked against them, because there was already this expectation of them to be like the caring, nurturing person. And when they almost like broke out of that character, like defied the stereotype that someone had for them, they were punished for it. So actually they did a lot of research, and they realized that the way a woman could actually negotiate a salary better was when she stuck to like the party line, I guess. And when she was like, she negotiated salary for the whole team. She was like, we should all get a salary. And like that kind of conformed to the stereotype, the existing stereotype, or like how she can use it to her advantage. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, yeah, it's not something I've tried to like practice, but I guess it's interesting because like every one of these like books you read is always like you should display more masculine traits because that's what helps you advance in the workplace. But actually, even doing that sometimes is punitive.
There's a very good book, I think it's called From 9 to 5 or something, and it's about the differences of men and women in language at work, and about how behavior and the language you use is perceived depending on whether you're a man or a woman. And it talks about salary negotiations and those kind of things, and it was very interesting. It's heavily based on research as well, and it talks about things like when you know that someone's gonna see your name or your gender, you act completely differently to when you're doing something anonymously. So I think they asked people to grade themselves on like a paper or something, and if it was anonymously, like women and men would grade themselves the same, like on average. And if you had to say your name or or tick your gender, then women would grade them like much lower than men would. And there was another research similar to that too, like salary conversations. And if you had to say your name when you apply for a job, you would like downplay your salary expectation. And if you didn't, you would just average out what like men and women would be the same. So the book doesn't really gives any tips on how to solve the problem, but it's good that it helps make very evident like the different things that you can, like the different ways of perceiving language from both sides. So very interesting. I'm going to post a link on the channel.
Like half distracted by the chat.
Like so much conversation happening in the chat.
Yeah,
I know.
there's like some good stuff there. I'm like, I don't want to miss, but then like by reading it, I'm like,
Yeah.
I think Janet has a good point about the actual interview process, and if that takes too long. So that could depend on a lot of people. A lot of places give out like assignments and things like that, tech things that can just take too much time.
Yeah, a codebar student was telling me recently they'd had to do like a 70-question code test, which seemed kind of excessive. Yeah. She didn't even get it finished in time for the deadline, but just decided to do it as a practice exercise, But that seemed to be asking for a lot of someone's time, even for like a first junior. I don't think it was a job. I think it was for a boot camp or something like that. Yeah,
that's insane.
I think now that you mentioned that, I kind of do want to throw that as a question. Like, what do you think? Just everyone, like, generally is like acceptable number of hours you should expect an applicant to spend on something like the technical test?
Yeah, we are currently having a discussion about this at Clio because we currently have a take-home tech test, and when I first came in, my feeling was I'm like personally against take-home tech tests. I just feel like it's quite a big ask of a candidate, and I just feel like it also, especially when the requirements aren't crystal clear, you can just end up spending anything between like 2 hours to 10 hours on the tech test, and
longer.
Yeah, and actually, like, I was given the counter argument by some other engineers who I think made a very valid point. Like, let's not remove the tech test. Let's make it so clear that we scope it to just 2 to 3 hours. Because the other thing was sometimes a lot of people don't like pairing interviews because it makes them anxious, like it gets them very nervous. It's like a very time pressure environment to like show us what you got in an hour. Whereas people felt more comfortable with a tech test that you can do as long as like it's a set limited amount of time and strict about it. And like as a company, we assess you based on it. So that I thought that was an interesting thing. I think like 2-3 hour max, really, especially if it's a dev that's working, like even for people that are switching careers, they're probably going to be doing some other work while applying for jobs. You have to be mindful of that. You also have to be mindful of the fact that you're applying for probably a few different jobs at the same time. Expecting them to spend like a whole weekend on your tech test is unreasonable.
Yeah, I did that for the last people we hired about the tech test, to explicitly specify in the tech test, look, I only expect you to spend an hour on this. You may not finish it, and that's okay, but don't spend more than an hour. Well, I had one of the candidates ask me if he could spend a bit more time because he had 10 minutes left, 10 minutes more to do to finish it, but yeah, time limiting it, absolutely, because you can't ask someone to spend, as you say, you can't ask someone to spend their weekend doing your test for the possibility that maybe they'll get an interview.
It's kind of like free labor, but for nothing. Yes. I think that's the bit that I feel a bit weird about asking people that spend too long on it. And I know this is recorded, but I'm not even afraid to say, yeah, we've got some more work to do, even at my current place. We reduced it to a day, but I still think personally it's too long. But we need a good way. Yeah, we're still thinking about how to restructure the test in such a way that you can do it in such a short amount of time. And then there's also I guess trying to use the test like a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. Like, I don't feel like the same test works when you use the test against juniors, against like a more senior developer, because I feel like their value comes from a more diverse range of sources. It's not just about their coding abilities.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't give the same test to a junior or a senior. The test has to be specific to the job.
Yeah, we haven't tested that out yet, so I think that is work in progress.
We do give the same one, but it's a fairly simple test. It's more like a cutter, like an implementation. But there's absolutely like separate grading requirements for a junior and a senior, because obviously we don't expect like a passing junior solution will look very different to a passing senior solution.
Yeah.
People grade, they absolutely know what level someone is at and what level they're coming in for, because yeah, like you just can't expect someone whose first job is it to give you the same solution, and you're being incredibly unfair to grade it in the same way.
Yeah, and then also I guess depending on the scope of the test, there are only so many ways to do the test, right? So at that point it's kind of hard to judge purely just on the test whether someone's a junior or senior, because if it's something that just can be done with like, I don't know, I'm talking in the context of a web application, like one REST API, then the senior person is still going to do that because they're not going to overcomplicate things just to show you they know how to do this, because that challenge doesn't really warrant that. And I feel like that's part of being a senior person as well, just knowing not to overcomplicate things. But it's like, how do you tell when the test is so narrow in scope? So you can't really just use that on its own, but yeah.
My last place when we did the test was, I don't know if you heard the shopping cart cutter. It's just like implementing, you can find it on like loads of, it's like a very standard Ruby cutter. It takes you an hour to do. This was where we did a pairing interview, and we gave it to everyone, juniors and seniors, because it wasn't particularly a difficult cutter. And funnily enough, like as you say, the seniors actually struggled with it more because they almost like overthought the problem.
That's interesting.
Seniors struggle with the issue because it was so simple. A lot of times they were like, there must be something in here which we have to prove. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like we were testing even seniors to show that they could do the simple thing. Like twist to the junior senior thing, I guess. Yeah.
What's the standard reaction when you
Yeah.
The standard reaction when you get a test where you being told you've got an hour to do it and you finish it in half an hour, you're like, there must be something missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I just ask how you did the pairing? So like when people do like pairing for like, how did that work?
Yeah, so in all the places, like both at Clio and at my last company where we did like pairing interviews, it's pairing, but it isn't really like true pairing in the sense of like having a driver and a navigator. It's very much that person codes, and we encourage them to communicate and to think out loud. We tell them that it's coming to the right solution isn't what we're looking for. A lot of the time, like what we're really looking for is that we just want to see what their thought process is to kind of like ease them into it, get them to feel like this isn't like you have to, we put you on a buzzer and we leave you there. And then we're obviously there as the interviewer. If they get stuck at any point, we sort of guide them along. Like if it's obvious that they're just making a little bit of syntax error, we nudge them in the right direction, because that's not what we're testing for. That's basically it. An hour pairing session.
Yeah, I've been doing some more pairing with candidates recently, and I have been being the driver, because it removes that sort of the pressure about writing the code in front of someone, which can be quite daunting, especially for junior people and even senior people in a sort of that assessment setup.
Yeah, live coding is not much.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's good.
And because what you get out of them is that, like, if you're trying to say, well, what's their thought process and how they think about stuff, the person who's meant to be doing the navigating should be explicitly kind of giving you that feedback in that case. Though it can be difficult, I think, if like a lot of people aren't used to pair coding and aren't used to doing that sort of driving and navigating style. So you still have that, but at least you've kind of removed some of the pressure. I'm still struggling a little bit to necessarily grade people. And I have made some hires based on that recently, and they're still a few months out before I'll know how well that went. But yeah, so maybe that's something as well, because obviously interviews and assessment can be quite stressful, as people mentioned.
So someone from my team who used to work at Makers, she was saying how what they did when they assessed students at the end of the course, they got them to record themselves, like working through something to sort of remove some of the, like someone is watching you right now, tension. So they would give them, they had to solve something, they could record themselves and they submitted that. And that was an interesting, like, I was like, I guess that would remove some of the pressure of that situation.
Yeah, and one point on the chat at the moment, if you do a test, allow people to use Google. You use Google in your day job. It's part of being able to do what you should do. And the number of times I use Google in a day to remind myself of things I should know but that I forgot. Yeah, let them use Google.
I actually had to do that multiple times in the ones I've done recently, because the candidate didn't know, and I was like, I don't know how to do this either, so we're going to look it up.
What Google's for. I mean, being able to memorize doesn't mean like you know that thing. There are things that's just not made to be memorized.
Has anyone here actually written their own sort outside of an interview? I have literally never implemented any kind of sorting.
I feel that's
ever.
A red flag.
And I've done like
people it's a very FANG company kind of interview.
It's like, yeah, I mean, I did one at Amazon, and they wanted me to do like the most efficient way to, I don't know, it's like, you know, find. It's like an array problem thing. It's like, I don't know. I Google it and then get a library, because my time's worth more than that. Like, you want me to ship the product? I'm not. Yeah, anyway, I didn't get the job.
On that whiteboarding interviews, I don't ever want to do one.
Yeah, I feel like the argument for that is so like staged and artificial. It's like it's to see how you think on the spot. I mean, what kind of bullshit is that? Like, you don't think on the spot when you code up a product and then roll it out to the customer. I mean, go through it, test it properly, have it properly reviewed. You're not going to be like sort of like drowning on your own without like a text editor to support you. So it's just yeah. But that seems to be a big company thing. If you are interested in applying for them, they still haven't really changed their process that much.
Yeah, and I think that's partly because they don't feel like they have to, right? They have so many candidates. Really...
And they're such a big name that people are basically fighting to work for them. So they kind of sort of milking that privilege.
Yeah, just to answer Maria's thing quickly from the chat, she's wondering if women are more honest and frank about their experience. And that's something we talked about right at the beginning, which is, men will apply for any old rubbish. Like, if there's 3 years experience, men will apply at 1. Because patriarchy, basically. Sorry, we don't care. Our advice would be to, like, if you think you can do 80% of it, apply. If you think you can do 50% of it, apply anyway. Like, or whatever, you've got nothing to lose. So.
I think
I think it goes back to that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go for
it. I was just going to say it goes. We were saying earlier about the male-female traits, for example. I think women are sort of, trained to be more modest and not brag about yourself and your achievements so much. So maybe that happens in job interviews as well. Where you're like, oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah. So Chris wants to know if people who only know 50% get hired, given some of the people I've worked with. Yeah,
I think probably some of them. Yeah, like
those companies when they put out job adverts, it's like a bit of a wish list, right? Like, out of all the candidates,
you should treat it. I think it's a wish list. I mean, okay, if you only know like one of the things out of 10, then maybe skill up a bit more first before applying. But if you know half of it, I think like
there is a flip side to this. Is that
but that habit of flagging is what's convinced me that a tech test could be useful, because the first time I did a tech test, I realized that the outcome of the test was inversely proportional to how much confident the person was, and the person who was the most confident it did the worst in the test. Also ask for the most.
Is that like that Dunning-Kruger effect, where like the stupid people don't stupid they are?
I do also remember this is a long time ago, but a friend of mine. It wasn't for a tech role; it was for like a graphic designer role. A friend of mine, male, applied for this job. Yeah, I mean they've asked for all these Adobe packages. I don't know them all. It's fine. So he gets there, gets his interview, meets everyone. They love him. They're about to offer him the job, and they say, "Really sorry, we're supposed to do this test. Do you mind sitting down and just mocking up a spread in InDesign or something like this?" And he sits down and he goes, "I'm really sorry. I don't know how to use it. I lied." And that was that. He didn't get the job. But I was amazed that he had the balls to even apply for the job and go for the interview when he didn't. He just assumed once he got there, there'd be someone who knew how to use it and he could just ask them, like just learn on the job. But, yeah, I wouldn't have done that. I never would have applied for the job because I didn't know the packages they were asking for.
So Chris has mentioned he wants to avoid a race to the bottom where people lie on their CVs. So the trick is not to lie. The trick is to tell the truth but apply anyway. Like, at least personally, when I've been hiring for people, I look for people who can problem solve. Your languages and your technologies are stuff that is mechanical. Your thinking and communicating are the hard things. Right, and the other thing I love when I used to do interviewing is if somebody says I don't know, they get like extra mega bonus points, because that is the scariest thing to say ever, and it's incredibly important because nobody knows anything.
I think it's more valuable if they say they don't know, but that's how they might approach it. So at least it's like that growth mindset that you don't know, but you have that mindset to maybe discover and find out how to do it. I think that's important.
Apologies, Chris. That's my mistake. So, Chris is she. That's me.
I would say that the flip side is that if a company has gone out of their way to obviously make it so that then their job ad lists what they actually need and not a wish list, then it probably reflects the fact that they're thinking about some of these topics and maybe are a nicer place to work. So maybe it's not that you want to lie to get into a place that's going to treat you rubbish, but apply to a place that's actually making an effort to treat you well.
I think there's a deliverer. I saw this in the job ads last year where they had like a thing at the top, which was, these are just, we're looking, these are the kind of things we want, but if you don't have the right experience or you have something different, apply anyways. We want to hear from you. And I thought that was actually a nice little nudge to anyone who was looking at the list and going, I don't know if I would fit.
Yeah.
There's a question from Anne Bush. To the men who are hiring, in an interview, do you listen for confidence or honesty? I'd say, well, potentially both. I mean, confidence is not necessarily a problem until it reaches the point of being dishonest, if you know what I mean. So it's hard to gauge.
Yeah.
I think also interviews, I really appreciate when candidates, like when you say, what's a time you failed, and they are very honest about it, because again, like as an engineer, you don't ever want to, that you shouldn't be punished for failure, and it's good that they've done something wrong, they've learned something from it, but it also it's a good way to show that actually this is an environment, we work in an environment where you can fail safely and quickly.
By the way, I just realized we've now overrun by 10 minutes.
Oh.
So if you want to go to other talks.
I didn't actually look at the time that closely. Oops.
I just looked at the time, sorry.
I mean, there are still people listening, so I'm guessing it is an interesting topic.
Yeah.
But it's your usual meeting room situation. There's nobody in this room afterwards, so nobody to kick us out.
Yes.
Oh, there's no sessions for Nani in the next one.
I'm going to go to the failure swap shop, but thank you, everyone.
Yes, yeah. I hope you have something to take back with you to adjust your process.
Thank you for all your insights. Do we know, once I leave this room, will I get some of the links on the chat? I don't want to lose.
I think once the event's finished, you can't go back to it. Because I've used the platform for a previous event before, and I wanted to go back to the chat and it was gone.
I'm gonna spend 5 minutes copying it.
I could send them to you directly if you want.
You should be able to.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chris.
Now you say that, I'm gonna go through if there's any interesting links.
Does anyone else have anything they wanted to finish off with? I'm hiring, by the way, if anyone wants a front-end job. I'm hiring a lot this year.
Cleo is hiring too. Come join us.
Yeah, we're hiring. I think even my place is hiring. Yeah, we're looking for more devs.
My team's doubled in
size. But I think my current place is the same problem as yours, Peter. But I don't know. I would argue we can probably take on one or maybe even two junior devs, but we think it's safer to have a stronger team first. I don't know. I'm not the decision maker sometimes near the top. But,
yeah, I think
that's a good point.
That's very much where I work at Clio. That's currently we are looking for.
We don't want to give juniors a crap experience coming in and throw them in the deep end and then expect them to work things out when they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at, where we think we can support a junior and like actually not give them, as you say, like a shared experience, because it is very much a like two-way street. When you hire a junior, you have to give them that environment to learn and grow. But with that problem, yeah, like so Clear was a startup, and now they're like slowly expanding the tech team. So when they had, I guess, like 7 engineers and they had 1 female engineer, it wasn't an issue. But now that they're growing, I really don't want it to be the case where they hit almost a threshold where any female engineer is going to come and look at the room and go, not for me. And I think the company realizes that. I think they've kind of like, they spend the last 6 months like trying to just scale very quickly, and then they've kind of turned around and gone, oh God, we really need to be better at this.
That's actually like, yeah, getting me thinking like, how can I start some conversation going back? Because I think we recognize it, and we see. I feel like at the moment there's a lot of talks. We need to like actually sit down, and come up with some actual strategy. But I guess the hiring slowed down a little bit, but I do hope that we get more diverse.
Yeah, I guess the main thing is like,
you can't help it. You've got to make it happen.
Yeah, you have to make it happen. It's like, so sitting down with like the people team who will be in charge of the hiring, speaking to your CTO, speaking to your CEO, like actually, like a lot of the time the remit for it comes from the top, right? And then once you have that thing, you can go crazy.
Yeah.
So like for us, we spoke to the people team at Clear who are like very receptive to all these feedback, and great. So they've like, for example, told recruiters for every non-diverse candidate, like give us a diverse candidate, like bring that to the table. So yeah, I think definitely start by having those conversations. Like make it a priority for the team. I think that we are potentially like thinking about, I don't know if this will happen, but I really want it to happen. It's like you always have to tie your goals to the business outcomes, right? In a way, like you have to tie it to something.
Yeah. Well, considering one of our like company values is like embrace diversity, so I feel like we've got to talk. We can't just talk. We've got to walk it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's also not good if like you're not actually doing those things. You've got to meet your company values, otherwise people will get upset.
It's like slowly improving, but there's definitely more work to be done. Yeah, I think that's definitely another follow-up conversation going back. So I remember having this quick chat with the HR person that we just hired. We haven't got a people's team until now, so I guess that made things a bit hard. And she mentioned that she's like had some strategies in mind that she might be implementing, but yeah, I'm going to follow up on that and see what those strategies are.
Do you also have like, I guess someone in the company who is responsible for like has taken ownership of it, right? Like,
I think so far that is like the new people's person that we hired. She's supposed to be like the directly responsible individual, I guess, for like ensuring our hiring going forward is more diverse.
Yeah, I guess it's also like getting, like actually the other thing is also making it their focus. I feel like with a lot of diversity initiatives, what happens is someone is in the company or a few people are passionate about it, but the minute it's not actually tied to like their work objectives and they get busy, then it completely gets sidelined. So like, for example, if your company's people team had very specific like diversity OKRs to hit, like if the OKR wasn't, because this is the thing I learned, right? Like a lot of times the people team has like an OKR of, hire 5 engineers this quarter. And they start off with like really good intentions, but suddenly they're like, oh shit, we really need loads of candidates. We need
to hit the OKR.
Exactly. But if you were more specific about it and you went, actually, no, we care more about like having a diverse set of people rather than just more people, your OKR is going to be specific to that. I think that will actually change the way companies behave in this way. I don't know.
Well, it goes the same way for juniors. I suppose if you're hiring 5 people, probably one of them should be a junior at least.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this. You probably want at least one person. Like, if you want to be able to dedicate someone to helping out a junior person. I think that's the kind of a thing that maybe we don't do enough in tech, where we don't mentor, coach the people below us.
And also every junior is different. Like I think we actually made an exception. I actually have a junior in my team right now. She's great. Like she needs some help, but it's not like the point where people think like you need to like handhold them or something. Like they're capable.
Oh, absolutely. Like we have a misconception in a lot of companies I've worked. There's always been a misconception of like if you're a junior, you won't be able to deliver. Like delivery was always associated with seniority.
Yeah.
Now, like if anything, seniors will argue about the thing. Like you tell them to implement it, and they'll like have a massive discussion about it. Whereas juniors will just actually do it.
Yeah.
They're learning. And I think we need to break that disconnect, because I've seen this in a lot of companies where you're like, why you ask why are you hiring only seniors, and they're like, oh, because we want people to like get on and like keep delivering really quickly.
And we wonder why there's a pipeline issue.
Oh yeah, definitely.
At least when that question was asked, my CTO at least acknowledges like he wants the team to get to a position where we can support juniors better before.
You can support them.
One thing I've seen for us that worked well for juniors is to have a very well defined piece of work for the initial 3 months. To say, okay, you're working on this project, and that's what we want you to do, and then it can get more complex as it goes along. But at least for the first 3 months, have something which is well defined with good outcomes, well defined outcomes, to say, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want to have, and do it in such a way that it's completely part of what the wider team does, so that they're not isolated, and that they get used to working with more senior people as well. But spending the time to define what they will do during their first 3 to 6 months, I found worked quite well.
I really like that. That's a good idea.
Would that be tough if you're in a startup environment?
Yeah, so we have
where things are kind of made up as you go along.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But
where requirements are like not exactly clear, so like, you got to define them.
But I guess even in a startup, there'll be 2 kinds of work, right? There'll be all the ad hoc, like crappy work you have to deal with, but there'll be certain things that have to be done. Like there'll be more clearly defined work that like the senior engineer might have spent time refining and like actually having thought through. And I guess it's just directing that work towards the junior. But yeah,
exactly. And for me, the least defined the work, the more senior the person to deal with it. Which is why I end up in my startup. I end up dealing with all the stuff that's undefined. Because I'm supposed to be the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly find that
I see my job as enabling the rest of the team to work efficiently.
And that's a lot of the time the job of the most senior developer, right? Like you are enabling, like a tech leader, the CTO, you are enabling. Your role is to enable everyone else below you to do their job well.
Yeah, you're not always going to be the code.
So one of the arguments I made in my company about hiring very like local seniors is that if you have like a very senior stacked team, for the people that you're hiring in who are slightly less senior, how do they grow if they're not actually mentoring anyone? If they're not actually like, if you have just a team full of like very senior people and mid-senior people, the mid-senior people don't actually have any room to like grow and take on leadership positions, and that's actually like a thing that companies care about because they want to retain their employees.
For sure. I'm currently implementing a change where I'm going to have all of my team doing mentorship and coaching, apart from the most junior in it, because you've either got to have the well-spec'd work, as Bruno says, or you need to spend more time helping the people be able to work on things that are a bit less spec'd, right? And so we should all help mentor people more junior than us. And so if all of our team if you set that kind of precedent where the team will help someone else and spend some time of their week helping someone else, then everyone will grow. And like the junior people grow because they're learning new skills, but also like the mid-level people get a chance to do mentoring and coaching, which they might not get until they would have got to like a leadership position previously. And so
one thing I've been doing with some of our devs recently is to tell them to tell some of the senior ones, who find an issue, to say, well, write the issue in GitLab and then assign it to that person and explain to them what it's all about. So there was Anne saying as well, if you're hiring, connect with Twitter Black Women in AI. I would also say if you're hiring juniors, put your JD on the codebar job board. You will get some very good applications.
Nice.
All right, I think I'm going to end it here. We are only 25 minutes over time.
Let's do that then. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
The other session. Yeah,
And my
thanks.
camera is going weird anyway. So.
Cool.
All right, thanks for a good chat.
Thank you. Bye.